Welcome back to Farmers. Ooh, I'm so excited to be introducing to you the QIS for beginners. This little freebie is actually a part of Masterclass 103. So if you are doing the RA short course, once you finish the third video of 103, please come to watch here. Now, if you're joining us from external sources, you're also welcome, but hopefully this gives you a good insight into what beginners are learning about when it concerns compiling medicine dossiers for SAHPRA, as this is the QIS, the very brand new template required for Module 2 summaries for SAHPRA submissions. So let's dive right into it. I'm going to share my window and we can get started. Okay, I hope you can see me. I've done this before to where I was just stuck talking to myself and nothing was showing on the screen. So I hope that's not the case. All right, so this is the QIS document from SAHPRA. It is effective 24 May 2024. It was updated last year in June. So it is the latest, most accurate available version. And this document, as we all know now, has replaced the score. However, if you are in regulatory affairs already, you would have been using the score document from 2023 onwards, as this was a major part of the 3-2R module, Module 3, the regional section. Now it has morphed into the QIS, and it is now part of the summaries. It's the quality information summary, and it now belongs in Module 2. So when you're submitting, for example, variation documents or applications rather, you will need to submit a QIS as well to show what the changes have been. But if it's a brand new document, you won't have to compare it to the score. You'll just start from the QIS onward. All right, so it comes in this format. It's a PDF document. It has 21 pages, of which the first page is just a foreword. It tells you that you need to highlight your document, your submissions. You'll need to delete this first page before you submit, before you submit your QIS. And it will need to be in a Word format. So you could just read through this. I'm not going to go into each and every sentence or phrase up in here. I just want to give you a very general overview. I am mindful of the fact that you are a beginner. If you're interested in deeper work, we do have an evaluator's short course where we get to analyze every aspect of the QIS, because as with the score, we used to evaluate every aspects that are critical. Now with the QIS, there's not much different. We're still going to assess that. And from a quality and bioequivalence perspective, we're going to look deeper into some of what the submissions may entail and the critical aspects to evaluate. All right, so once you start on page 1 over here, let me just try, and can I reduce or maximize this at all? I don't know. I'm working from a new computer, which is a little, it's a little unusual for me, but let's do this. Okay. So you'll start with the intro, right? Every document hopefully has an intro. And this is the summary of product information. So on the following table, you're going to have to input or populate it with your information pertaining to the drug, the medicine, the biosimilar, the biologic, the even complementary medicine soon, the orthodox that you are trying to register. Bear in mind, if you are registering multiple strengths, you're going to have to input every one. If you have multiple manufacturers, likewise, you're going to have to put information for each one. So bear that in mind as certain sections will need to expand accordingly. So your non-proprietary name is the name which does not belong to you. So that means it's the common name of the API. For example, if it's Panado paracetamol, paracetamol will be non-proprietary and Panado will be proprietary to the company. If it's enalapril, that's non-proprietary, whereas Pharmapril, which is our example we use in the short course, that is proprietary. So you'll put that name there. Next, the proprietary name is the one you want to register. If you're the owner of the certificate, you're welcome to create any name you'd like. Bear in mind, the Names and Scheduling Committee has eyes on you, and you have to follow the guidelines pertaining to naming. Okay, we're not going to go into that. That's a different class and a different day. The international non-proprietary name, if different, now you need to include the salt or whatever its active form is. So if it's malleate, hydrochloride, whatever is added to that non-proprietary name has to now come on here. And this is important because when registering medicines, we all know that the salts sometimes do make a difference, but also you may be registering different types of generics, and so the different salts will actually come and be different. The applicant name is you as the applicant, whether it's your company, whether you are a consultant, whether you're a manufacturer, and your address, full address, the address of license, not the address where you sometimes practice, not the address where you moved from or where you're going to, your actual address that is licensed or that is under licensing for compliance. You want to add your dosage form. So if this medicine is going to be a syrup, if it's a tablet, if it's a capsule, et cetera, and the application number or numbers. So here you may have one or multiples. For example, if you apply, once you send an email requesting an application number, SAHPRA will email you and send it back. You may want to decide to register a duplicate, so it'll be the master plus another. You may decide to have a clone. So whatever the case might be, you may have multiple numbers. The strengths, if you decide to register 10 milligram, 20 milligram, and 40 milligram or 250 milligram per 5 mils and a 500 milligram per 5 mil, that's up to you. All the strengths need to come here. Your route of administration, if it's oral, if it's injectable, if it's intramuscular, if it's subcutaneous, if it's topical, if it's intraocular, intranasal, transdermal, whatever. The route in which it's going into the body. Then you need to write the oh, I skipped the strengths. Did I know I said strengths? The proposed indications. So again, if it has multiple indications, write them all. Uh, or if you just want to use one of the indications. But remember, whatever you write on here is going to be what they use to check your substantiation of claim or of evidence needed. So if it's, for example, which one has a lot of indications? Okay, let's say vitamin C, right? You could use it for scurvy, or you could use it for immune boosting. Now, if you just write scurvy, you're just going to be able to provide information about that. If you write both, you'll need to provide literature evidence for both. If you write that this thing treats fever and it's an anti-inflammatory and it's a um, painkiller and it has, I don't know, whatever other properties, each and every claim, each and every indication is gonna have to get supported. This is why when they do pharmacovigilance and when there is long-term safety studies, you find that, excuse me, certain indications tend to change over time, or certain medicines tend to change their indications over time by reducing or removing some of the ones that have been found to not be so clear or so safe. So, less is more and less is safer, I guess. But be specific about what it is intended for. If it's essential hypertension, write that. If it's preventive, write that. If it's curative, if it's to treat whatever, specify that. Okay, and then the primary contact person responsible for this application. So this should be your responsible pharmacist or your regulatory affairs pharmacist, whoever is authorized to be liaising with SAHPRA. This you would have written on your module 1. You would have given the authorization forms, letters signed and stuff. So that's the person. Then their contact job title. So if there are pharmacovigilance pharmacist, RA, regulatory affairs pharmacist, if they're a responsible pharmacist, you specify that. And contact person's email address. Here you need to, just like with the contact, provide as many as 2 is preferable than 1 number. Have a backup number in case, they can't get a hold of you on the first one. Same with the email, have 1 or 2 so that you will not be missed or out of touch if they do need to contact you, and your number as well. Now we move to the administrative summary. This is pertaining to the application. So they want to know what's the date of preparation or revision of the QIS. If it's the first time you're submitting, whether the second or third time, if it's for variations, you need to state that so they kind of can trace it. Then they want to know any other related dossiers, if there's an FPP, if there's a different manufacturer or a different FPP that has your API submitted, or a different API manufacturer that's using your same submission, whatever the case is. If there's a related submission, include the number, the registration status, the API name, strength, dosage form, and the API manufacturer. If this product has a reliance dossier, write the original submission sequence and any follow-up evaluation pathway used, and the name of the RRA that it had been registered in, let's say Australia, the US, European, centralized or decentralized, and then the unredacted assessments provided, if you had provided them. If it was just the access letters, you can also state that, but they want to know as much information. So this table needs to be completed for every sequence submitted. So if you had an initial sequence, maybe 4 zeros, and then there was a query, and then a change of a submission, and then it became 0001, and then there was another variation you submitted, and then it became 0002, you have to submit all of those sequence. You have to submit this table for all of those sequences. Now we move to the substance part. So the drug substance is the API. Basically, it's the active raw material. In this section, everything pertaining to the raw ingredients have to be provided. So think of it as the pre-manufacturing part to the finished product part. You have to indicate which options apply for your submission for API. So you'll get to know that to submit an API, there are multiple options you can use. You can either have a CEP, which is one of the most common ones, especially for European monographs. If you have a CEP, it's kind of easy peasy. the manufacturer would have given you permission. Your name would have been on the certificate. It would have had the storage conditions, the expiry dates, and everything. You submit that. If not, if you might be an API manufacturer yourself, so you will then have your own API-MF that you've submitted to SAHPRA directly. That's your own drug master file for the API that you would have submitted to them, either fully or in part, the open and closed parts. You would, or alternatively, you could have a pre-qual from the WHO. So if you have a confirmation of API pre-qualification document, you can also submit that. Or if it's a full detail API, if it's the first time you never submitted anything to SAHPRA prior, then it's the full document version. You can also include that. Now for the manufacturer. Do note here that they put in brackets name and manufacturer. That means they want you to name the manufacturer. Why this is important is because in cases where you have multiple manufacturers, maybe a primary and then a secondary or a backup, they want to know which one you're referring to. For most applications, it'll be the primary and that's it. For smarter applications, there'll be a secondary or backup. And you have to state in each case the manufacturing details. So if you have the primary manufacturer for your API, you're going to have to list all their information. And then if you have a secondary manufacturer, again, you create a secondary section and list all of their information and name. So you duplicate the sections as it pertains to each manufacturer. So their name and address, including the blocks or units that they are in. Very important. I remember as an evaluator, we always had to check addresses because you find that sometimes things don't add up. You'll have a manufacturer who's in China. Maybe they are packing in Beijing. They're actually doing the production and manufacturing in Guangzhou, and then they are wholesaling or holding the stock, warehousing, or distributing in Beijing or somewhere else. So each site needs to be specific to its own license. If your GMP manufacturing license is in Guangzhou, you cannot provide a site or address of like Shanghai or somewhere else. That's not going to correlate. So very important to check the addresses versus the units and what each one is doing. Hence, they say responsibility. So if you're only packing in one place, and you're only manufacturing or producing in the other place, or you're formulating in the other place, or you're releasing in the other place, all that needs to be specified. Okay, and then they want to know if you have an API PQ number, an API MF, or a CEP number, write it down. And if you have a letter of access, if you provided a letter of access to the manufacturer, you also have to state it. And this is basically just access to the closed parts or the confidential parts of the API dossier or manufacturing processes. Usually sent directly from the API manufacturer to the RRA in question. So sometimes the FPP manufacturer may not even know details about that API unless they are also the API manufacturer and the FPP manufacturer. I remember working at an API manufacturer who was also making their own FPP, so they had both. Now, the controls of material, also very important. Here, you'll again state the name of the manufacturer. For API option 4 only, you need to include this. So this option 4 was the one of the full detail. So if you have a certificate, a CEP, you're fine. If you have an API MF with open and closed procedures sent to SAHPRA, you're fine. If you have a pre-qual, you're fine. But if it's full details in this application as the first off, you need to also include how you controlled the materials. And basically, this is just stepwise of how the API and the other IPIs are controlled and ensured that they're pure and safe and all of that. So you then have to show the specification, so what this API is, and what kind of standards you used, whether it was another international pharmacopoeia, a European pharmacopoeia, a United States pharmacopoeia, a British pharmacopoeia, or an in-house. Okay, you need to state that. You need to state the reference number and version that was used to make it. You need to describe the tests. So the acceptance criteria, like what will make it pass, and what procedures you're using for that. So for example, I'm just going to say description. Maybe you said it has to be a whitish or yellow to white powder. The acceptance criteria will be light yellow and white, or yet light yellow to white. So if you get a harsh yellow or dark yellow, that's a fail. And maybe the procedure to test that will just be visual inspection. Okay, same with identification. What are its characteristics? What are its peaks? What are its structures? Impurities, same, if it's a process impurity, if it's a organic, inorganic, if it's a residual impurity, the type and acceptance criteria, you have to explain allowing none of it, or if you're allowing 0.05%, not more than, you're going to have to state that and how to tell. So which procedures do I need to do? Do I need to use an HPLC? Do I need to use infrared? Do I need to use XRD? Do I need a microbial analysis? Like you have to specify what is going to be the acceptable procedure to ascertain the criteria for the specification. Then under container closure, again, this is how the product is sealed, how it's kept, how it's transported. They call it container closure system because it's not just how it comes, but it's also how you close it. Most powders will come in like this polyethylene material. So sometimes it'll be a big old bag, like those big rice bags that you'll buy in bulk, those woven. PE material, like a plastic. It's usually always double-lined, just to prevent cross-contamination. The inside would most probably be like a type of foil or aluminum material. That could be heat sealed. That could be fastened with a plastic flip. Different types of closure systems, but you have to describe that. Then with the stability, also have to describe how is this product stable? What tests have you undergone with this closure system? And mind you, excuse me, if your closure system is different than your storage system or material, you have to again prove that it is stable in that other container closure system. So it's always best to use the same so that when you do your stability testing, it's the same as what the material or closure that you're going to use to pack it, to receive it, to store it, to send it off. And then the retest period. How stable is it in this condition and how often does it need to be retested? Is it 60 months? Is it 36 months? Is it 4 years, whatever, 5 years, usually? And then you have to state that. And do indicate here if a shelf life is proposed in lieu or instead of a retest period. So sometimes they will give you a shelf life. Sometimes they'll give you a retest period. Um, and that's basically that. Then we come to the product, the finished product. Okay, so all that was for the substance. Now we come to the finished product. Here, it is when your API is now stable, it has come to you, you're about to mix it with your other ingredients, stabilizers, fragrance, flavorants, sweeteners, whatever. So here they want a description and composition of the FPP. So you got a formulation list or an ingredient list. If you have binders, if you have stabilizers, if you have sweeteners, if you have alcohols, if you have colorants, all that needs to come in here. Each one with their strengths, percentages, and quantities all labeled out. So you need to create more lines. If you have 10 ingredients, you need all 10 lines. And yes, you will need to include individual components of mixture, even if prepared like the coating agents, and any overages. So an overage is usually the excess amount of API that you provide in a formulation. And this is to anticipate or to prevent loss or to anticipate loss during the manufacturing process. Loss can happen due to certain manufacturing procedures or degradation. So an overage is sometimes necessary. But again, there's contention over that. And then write out all your ingredients and all your components, um, colorants, coating capsules, imprinting, ink, etc. And you have to describe any accompanying reconstitution diluents. These can creep up and become impurities. So those need to also be stated. Formulation developments. Okay, so here you're going to explain how the whole thing went down. Information on primary batches, including comparative bioavailability or biowaiver, stability, and commercial batches. So the submission, the registration, and the exhibit. So how your formulation was perfected. If you started off with comparative bioavailability, you're going to list your batch numbers here. You're going to state for proportional strengths of biowaiver. If you use bioequivalence or biowaiver, you're going to state the stability studies done. And all these are in triplicates, right? These are 3 batches. So that's what the 3 columns are for. And they preferably need to be 3 consecutive batches. And then you're going to state what packaging there were in for the testing, stability studies, continue the production batch, primary batch, and the validation studies. You repeat that. And the first 3 consecutive batches for validation studies, for process validation protocols. So if you're process validating, for example, you are doing what? Let's say you're making a product into, I don't know, a multiple pack unit, and you want to validate your process that during production of this batch, your tablets are mixed in equal parts. So that in itself is a different batch than your primary batch or your production batch. This will be the validation for your protocol of separation. So anyway, that was maybe not the best example, but it's a different validation to the main batches. You also include that in triplicates. And then you continue summary of formulations and discussions of any differences. So you will check production batch, validation batch, how they differ and what the variations may mean, the percentage differences, and then you complete them here with all the 4 layers, 1, 2, 3, as applicable, contents of capsules, products, injections. Okay, so here again, for all your 3 relevant batches, they want to see the components of your ingredients and how they all varied or changed as you developed them. Um, yeah. Okay, so in the manufacturing portion, okay, now if it's a different site or block or unit, the address needs to be stated and the responsibility. What part of the manufacturing were they doing? Then the batch formula, you want to know your largest intended commercial batch. If you're going to do 300,000 units of this capsule, you need to state that. Other intended commercial batch sizes, maybe you're also going to make 100,000 for a contract manufacturing agreement. Maybe you're going to make another test batch. I don't know for what, but you just got to list all of them here and then list all the components of the FPP used in manufacturing process and their amounts on a per batch basis, including components of mixtures prepared in-house, like coating and overages. So here you're again going to list all of the components, the strengths, the label claim, master production document, reference number and version. So your BMRs, BMRs mostly will come here. Batch size, number, units, and quantities for all 3. Okay. You're going to describe your manufacturing process and process controls. So they want a flow diagram. Here it's literally a representative flow diagram. Like you start here with your raw ingredients, you weigh the stuff, you mix, maybe you coat, you dry, you add in something, you mix, you granulate, you mix, and then you package and it's finished. That arrow flow diagram. Then they want you to, so you write that in a narrative as well. So the one is the picture in A, and then in B, you write it out as a paragraph or as like a narration with bullet points as possible. So you'll say all the processes, the parameters, the equipment, if you're using what kind of paddle, what kind of mixer, what kind of granulator, what kind of oven, all that kind of stuff. Come and explain it here. And then the controls of these critical steps and intermediates. How do you check for when the granulation is done and dry? How do you check for when the product has cracked? How do you check at what stage or at what point do you verify that the next step can go on? So they want to explain that. And then, yeah, all the compressions and coding and stuff, all the controls, and then your proposed or validated holding period for intermediates. If you already have validated it through those earlier validation protocols, great. If you're yet to propose it, maybe it's still your very first batch development, fine. So you can propose that here. Process validation and or evaluation. They want a summary of the process validation and or evaluation study conducted and or a summary of the proposed validation protocol for the critical steps or the critical assay used in the manufacturing process. So any document codes for the process validation protocols and or reports need to be included and add the version numbers and dates. Okay, then for the control of the final product, they want the specs. What is this finished product looking like? So you have to state all its specifications. And by the way, these specs are usually what you see when you order an API or FPP. That spec sheet is literally these specs that the manufacturer has stated. So again, the description, identification, impurity, assay, and everything else that's required there. So if you want to do antimicrobial testing and everything else, how much bacteria is allowed in there, all the pathogens. If you want E. coli, if you're going to test for salmonella and all the common ones, what are the acceptance criteria? You have none, or maybe you have 0.02 or not more than 0.04. All that needs to come and be stated here, the acceptance criteria, and the analytical procedure to verify that. And then the container closure, same as with API. How is this thing sealed? Is it a bottle and a cap? How is the cap? Is it the lock one? Is it a blister pack with aluminum foil and the plastic covering? Is it a, however this product comes in as, you need to describe that with all of its material and the size, the color, the fits. They want to see if it's fit for purpose, if it's going to protect the product, if it's light sensitive, if it's moisture sensitive, if it's all of that. And then the colors, the size, the bottle containers, the dimensions. There's primary packaging, secondary packaging, all of that good stuff. And then lastly, the very most important part, stability. We used to always get pestered on this section. Check for stability. Check for shelf life. Check for stability commitments. And sometimes, a lot of times, stability protocols or approvals will not be done because they take time, right? 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. So if you are in the process of registering a medicine, you don't always have the full 36 or 24 months of stability. So what you can do is give what you have, maybe 12 months, maybe 16 months, and then you can make a commitment to say, okay, once the period comes through of the remainder of the stability time, then I will submit the outstanding stuff, the outstanding info. You can show the container closure system, storage statements, and shelf life. Okay. And stability statements and conclusions. They want to see storage conditions, relative humidity, storage temperature in degrees Celsius. If you're American or applying from America, don't use those Fahrenheits. Please convert to Celsius. They want to see the batch numbers, the batch sizes, and then the tests and acceptance criteria. Stated there, this testing frequency and the container closure. Stability protocol for commitment batches. You need to show the tolerance, batch numbers if known, batch size, test acceptance criteria, testing frequency, container closures as for the other. And these parameters again, for stability protocol for ongoing batches, same. But if it's ongoing, they at least want to see production batch every year, per year, at least one. So unless none is produced that year, but in each container closure of a batch made in that year, they want to see the same info and stability data. So bracketing and matrixing design for commitments and or continuing ongoing batches. They want to see based on the um, storage conditions, climate conditions, what the batch strength, batch number, size, container closure system, and the completed and proposed test intervals are going to be. So again, all pertaining to stability data, depending on how far your product is in the developing stage. And then a written commitment for manufacturers. This is now just for SAHPRA use. So they'll tell you, important note, the production information is essential part of the medicinal product. So the PI and PIL published on the SAHPRA repository have been quality assured by SAHPRA experts and reflect the situation at the time of publication of the PI and PIL. These texts, like the PI and PIL, are registered and should be adhered to. Generally, a deviation from the registered product information, especially as to content, means that the product can no longer be considered to be registered. So if your PI and PIL are based off of your current information on stability or storage or whatever, and then something changes, you can no longer register that product even after the commitment was made. You need to amend everything or change the application or do a variation if it was already registered and stuff like that. For API, if applicable, primary stability study commitment. I honestly have never seen a commitment for an API. I've seen plenty commitments for FPPs. So as and when needed. And yeah, the CEP usually states its own storage conditions and expiry dates and like shelf lives and stuff. So if a CEP had it should state that on the certificate in any case, dated by day, month, and year. But I've never seen a commitment for a CEP. So that's new, but I guess it happens. If they had to state it on here, it probably happens. And then the third case is for full applications. The applicant provided a written commitment regarding ongoing stability studies. Unless otherwise justified, at least one batch per year of the product will be included in the stability program. Okay, the stability protocol will be that which was approved for primary batches. Out of spec results, significant changes or significant atypical trends will be investigated, and any confirmed significant change or out of spec results will be reported immediately to SAHPRA. The possible impact on batches on the market will be considered in consultation with SAHPRA. So as a manufacturer or as an applicant, this is what you need to commit to. Same with FPP where applicable, stability statements and commitments. You will have to follow up. You will have to submit outstanding stuff. Annually, you will have to submit your batches. And when you do a proposed commercial batch, it's got to be 100,000 units or less. No, it has to be 100,000 units or 10% of the bigger amount. And yeah, the applicant provides the commitment. So all these are just extra notes to take, to be mindful of. Read through that, guys. But that's it. Then you version control your document and submit. Sign and declare and submit. So yeah, that's about it, you guys. This is the QIS for beginners. If you have any questions, do email us at academy@farmers.co.za. If you're part of the short course, obviously communicate to us through our private groups. And happy learning. Continue with the rest of the short course or enroll for any new one you're interested in. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this was really helpful and insightful. Regulatory affairs all the way. And yeah, I would love to hear feedback from you. Comment below if you're watching this on YouTube. Let us know in the comments, and we'll catch you next time.